Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore. I'm Elizabeth, your host for this evening, and I am joined this evening by author Dr. Daniel F. O'Neill, who is the author of a book, Survival of the Fit: How Physical Education Ensures Academic Achievement and a Healthy Life. This book is available from Gibson's Bookstore. We offer in-store browsing, curbside pickup, shipping. We do it all. And you can order directly from our website, or you can walk on in for us. Now, Dan, this book, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, excellent.
I've lost my video, but
okay. Well, I can still see you, so we're still here.
Okay.
And with your tech support is in the room with you, which is always good to have on site. So this book is about academic achievement and physical education in schools. Tell me a bit about it.
So the book really started years ago. I've been in the medical game now for close to 40 years, and just seeing what was going on with our young people and seeing their health deteriorating, their academics deteriorating, and their mental health deteriorating. Everything about their lives seemed to be getting worse. And when you talk to people my age, I'm in my 60s and such, everybody seems to feel the same, that kids aren't having as much fun as we used to have. And, I didn't understand that. So as I started going into it, it became clear why kids are not having as much fun and why we have this obesity and health epidemic. And my solutions for it became the book.
So tell me, you have a presentation for us. Would you like to share that?
I do. If everybody's ready, I'll go through a few slides, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and comments after this. But whenever you're ready, let me know. Can you see the first slide up there then, Elizabeth?
Not yet.
Okay. So I have to put that up then?
You do indeed.
Okay. So we have a little snafu here. My tech support is online. Share.
Where is?
Say, I'm so sorry. Let me know. Are you sure you don't want to push share? All right.
There we are.
There we are.
Let's try this one more time.
There it is over down there, hon.
No. We had it.
Yeah, I don't know what.
There we go.
You see that? All right, great.
I see it now.
So you still see it?
Yes, I do.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. I'm going to see if I can change the slide. There we go. So we have a problem. 30% of our children are overweight, 20% obese. But the real crime is these children have diseases. They have diabetes, most importantly, but they also have other so-called Western diseases. This generation will have a shorter lifespan than the previous. And that's an absolutely extraordinary statement. We have not been able to say that since the Black Plague, basically. Now, I know for those of you who are paying attention, there are diseases of despair. Obviously, we've had COVID. So a lot has happened in the last a year and 5 years. But the biggest thing that has happened is this the obesity epidemic, which has led to all this other problems. So when I was a kid, we used to steal our parents' cigarettes, and everybody smoked back then. And the concern was, well, you're going to have lung cancer, you're going to have emphysema at the age of 50 or the age of 60. Well, our children now are sick now, where they're not waiting till they turn 50 or 60. They have the diabetes, the high cholesterol, the horrible depression, anxiety. And this is all because they're not moving, because they're not exercising. We made a big deal as a society the year before the pandemic with measles. And we had about 1,000 cases of measles in the United States. And, with all due respect, that's nothing compared to what's going on with this obesity crisis and the children whose lives we're losing. And whether we like it or not, the children we've lost during this pandemic have had underlying diseases. And I know everybody wants to point to this one case in Detroit or this one case in Kansas or whatever. Well, maybe there's one, maybe there's two, but the hundreds of children that have died are because they went into this pandemic unhealthy. Whether we like it or not, we have not evolved significantly in the last 200,000 years. And I was talking to Elizabeth about this before the talk, and she calls it her shark brain. But we have these primitive parts of our brains that still need to be fed. And the way we fed them for millennia was by being busy, by walking or running 10 or 12 miles a day. And mind you, 10,000 steps is only about 5 miles. And we ate a wide variety of unprocessed foods. So what happened? Well, the first thing that happened before Steve Jobs and Ronald McDonald was agriculture, period. So 10,000 years ago, when agriculture started, we started getting a lot less healthy. And then we had in the Industrial Revolution, and now, of course, the computer revolution is probably the most damning. So we have a two-headed monster. We have the screens, we have the computer revolution. And again, you all know, you all have children that are addicted to these screens. And I use the word addiction very deliberately. They are addicted. They are addicted to the iPhones and to their tablets and to their video games. And they are addicted to the ultra processed foods. So one thing that's happened since my book was published is I've had some food people contact me, and I'm working with some folks right now out of Johnson and Wales to see if we can combine these two programs, because again, these are addictions that are literally killing our children. We have a problem in that we have a foe that we have a very difficult time fighting because they are spending billions of dollars. They have the bully pulpit, as it were. They are selling Call of Duty to our kids. They are selling video games. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of really smart Ivy League grads out there whose job it is to make sure your kids do not turn off that computer, whether they're on Facebook or they're on Call of Duty or any of these other things. And you notice I don't know a lot of video games, but whatever they're doing, these really smart people out there have figured out how to keep them addicted, whether it's the likes, whether it's the beeps, whatever. Added to that, the billions and billions of dollars that they spend on advertising foods heavy in sugar, salt, and fat. And now we have a problem. Adults can do better, but it is very difficult. And I'll be really interested to hear everybody's opinions on this. But there is hope. We have what I call a physical identity. And this is something that I've observed over the years and was again a big push to write this book. All animals have a physical identity when they're born, whether they're humans, whether they're puppy dogs, yes, whether they're octopuses, whether they're octopi, whether they are bears. And you know that. You turn on YouTube, I suppose, and you can find, so I'm told, all kinds of great videos with animals playing. And although I will say one of the best is the elephant and the puppy dog video, but we have a physical identity that we're born with. We are born to move. We're born to explore the outdoors. We're born to respond to nature. This is what we do. Any 2-year-old has a physical identity, but slowly that physical identity seeps out of them as they get older, as they're introduced to television and to flat screens and to bad food. And then when they get to school, things take a turn, sadly, for the worse. So you were born with a physical identity. Hopefully, everybody in this audience has a physical identity. They've been getting out, enjoying the snow, enjoying the cold weather. Your children hopefully have a physical identity. But the sad part is that this is another example of the 80-20 rule, where about 20% of our kids have a physical identity and the other 80% do not. And those are the kids that we are losing, and we might have lost this generation already. If we maintain physical identity, if we don't allow the kids to lose it, they're going to grow up to be busy 2-year-olds and cooperative and imaginative, and all the things that they do as kids, all the play, all the digging in the dirt, all the eating grass. This is all part of growing and of a positive maturation process. We cannot let this change. When you lose physical identity, not only are we losing our health, our physical health, but we're losing our mental health. And this is why we've had this extraordinary uptick in young people's stress and depression and anxiety. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking. But the other big thing that people don't talk about is academics. You are losing this generation academically because they are simply not fit enough to learn. So these are some of the words children will use about video games and about the things they find on the computers. Our job is to do better, and we can do better, and Mother Nature can and does do better, but we can't let the kids lose Mother Nature. We can't keep the kids inside. We have to make sure they're out there and they're maintaining their physical identity. So the world has changed, and it's changed with all of us who fight fitness and such. And part of it is we don't do a lot of things that we used to do when I was a kid. And it leads to what I call the 200 calorie surplus. We wake up in the morning now and we're already 200 calories up because we're not going to do these little things like cranking the car window, getting up to answer the phone, getting up to change a TV channel. But with the kids, their calorie surplus is coming because they're not playing outdoors. They're not walking to school. They're not playing pickup games. They haven't learned that skill because we haven't let them learn that skill. One of the examples I love is I have a cousin who lives in Pelham, New York, and Pelham, New York, in their foresight, built the school right in the middle of town. And this is a suburban community. So no kid was more than a mile from the school. So I visited my cousin on a school day a few years ago. And what did you see? Cars lined up, parents dropping their kids off at school. And so our kids are not doing anything physical in the 21st century. One more thing, they're not going to leave school at the age of 18 or the age of 22 and then go get a physical job, because the blue collar jobs and the physical jobs are gone. And the sad part is they're not getting physical education in school, and that's where we can make the difference. So this is the most important slide. We will not have better math scores until we have better health scores. There is no STEM without fitness. There is no STEM without fitness. When we changed, sorry, let me just pop back there. When we changed No Child Left Behind in 2002, the goal was to increase our STEM scores, our math scores, our English scores. And what did the schools do? The schools took 50% of time away from physical education and gave it to math and English. What happened to math and English scores? Nothing. They stayed the same. The kids are not fit enough to learn math. This is why Ethiopian kids and Mongolian kids and kids from these other countries are doing better. They're energized. They're pushing the envelope, but our kids are not. This is another very contentious part of the book. What happens today is, and this happens around the age of 7, and I talk a lot about it in terms of identity. One of the things children develop quickly is an athletic identity because they understand that athletics are prized. And whether that's on the evening news or whether that's in the newspaper or whether that's on their websites. And whether that's people wearing hats that say the Red Sox and the Patriots and these other teams. But what happens is that in the old days, if you were not a particularly athletic kid, you still rode your bike and you still built forts and you still ran around and skipped rope and played make-up games. Today, the kids are getting onto the video games for the reasons that we had a couple of slides ago, because they're excited, because they're interesting, and because they don't have an adult hassling them. So again, this is another thing, when we talk about why I wrote this book, this is another change that I've seen over the years as a sports medicine doctor. It's absolutely insane the pressures we're putting on these kids. And you see it on WMUR, you see this emphasis on what kids are going to college, what colleges have they recruited for athletes, instead of saying, well, John Smith and Liz Doherty are going to University of Illinois because they have a great engineering program. We don't talk about that, but we do prize athletics. And the kids that can afford to play the athletics are the kids that are doing well. They're doing better academically because they're healthier, and they do better in life because they get the breaks. So here's the answer. Public school physical education is our only hope to maintain physical identity. Public school physical education, not public school sports, public school physical education. I want our children to be fit enough to play sports. I'm a sports medicine doctor. I have a degree in exercise and sports psychology. I get sports. I love sports. I have worked with the US ski team and the US ski jump team and universities. I get it. I love sports, but that's done. This is 2021. Yes, 100 years ago, we could afford to have both. We could afford to have physical education and sports, but now that's not the problem anymore. The problem is 80% of our kids are unfit. A school's PE program is the key, in my opinion, to maintaining their physical identity. But our system is stuck in the past. And I've showed this next line in front of physical education teachers, and I hope there are some in the audience. PE is the only profession where if a teacher from 100 years ago was beamed down here, they would be horrified. Dudley Sargent's name is on the marquee at the physical therapy school down at Boston University. Dudley Sargent would be horrified what he sees in PE, and not because our PE professors and our PE teachers and our PE students are not being educated. They are super educated. They have a brilliant education. If you look at the curriculum at Plymouth State, if you talk to these kids, if you go to Springfield College or UNH, these kids are smart. They're ready to go, but we are not allowing them to actually be that linchpin of the school that they need to be. This is not something controversial. This was recognized. This has been recognized. It was recognized by Dudley Sargent 100 years ago, but it was recognized by the state of California in 1866. They had to have 2 exercise periods a day. And you know that these kids did not come to school with their video games. These kids were already walking to school. These kids are already doing chores. But that's how important they knew revving up that heart is revving up that brain. And if you don't have that heart revved up during the school day, you're not going to rev up the brain and the kids are just not going to learn. There's no controversy. We have the scientific data. When I said to a fellow I was working with about a little study that we were doing up here at Interlake School System, I thought he was going to reach through the phone and strangle me. We don't need more study. We have the data. We know that these kids need 30 to 45 minutes of high intensity exercise a day. And what do I mean about that? What I mean is that if we go into these classes, we're going to see these kids moving for 11 minutes, 16 minutes in one study. They're not getting their heart rates up. The other thing I say that upsets some PE teachers, and certainly the ones that are coaches, stop picking teams, stop worrying about ball and stick sports. We don't need them. They just waste time. Let the children learn how to play baseball and these ball and stick sports on their own time, but we don't have time to do it in school. We've got to rev their heart rate. The role of our schools and is to not produce athletes for UNH, for Boston College. The role of our schools is to graduate kids that know how to exercise, that are fit, and have a brain that's ready for academic achievement. John F. Kennedy recognized this, or actually it was Eisenhower who recognized this. And what happened back in the late 50s is like said, geez, we have this thing called television. We have fewer farming jobs, and we have the suburbs, and we haven't had a war, and these people are getting unhealthy. We've got to do something. So Eisenhower started the President's Council of Physical Fitness, and then JFK took it, but then it's kind of died. So this is my 6th grade level for high school education. 6th grade reading level. You should be able to do a plank for 2 minutes. I'm so sorry about that. You should be able to do sit-ups. You should be able to do some push-ups, maybe a pull-up. I would hope that every kid can walk, swim, and ride a bike. That's a physical identity. That is our job as adults, to graduate a healthy children from high school. So maybe we need a rebranding. Maybe we shouldn't call it gym class. We shouldn't call it physical education. But whatever we want to do, however we want to rebrand this, if we brand this, and you know this from watching these 2 and 4-year-olds, they don't need any impetus to run around. They've got it. They've got the physical identity. We just have to let them express that. They have that connection with nature. We just have to not sever that by keeping them inside. So conclusions in no particular order. Organized sports are part of the problem. Our children are truly addicted to screen time and to bad food. We're not going to cure this with a Just Say No campaign. Again, Steve Jobs, Ronald McDonald, these guys are much too smart for that. They find ways around that. We need a positive, and that positive is our physical identity. You are not a non-athlete at the age of 7. The poor fitness that we have in these children is epidemic, and it's expensive, and it's dangerous, and it's costing us billions and billions of dollars. As a physician, my head explodes when I'm told that we can't afford healthcare for all of our citizens. We can afford that, and especially if we get our citizens healthier. And I'm to blame. Doctors are partly to blame because we have been playing whack-a-mole with disease rather than worrying about health. We need to maintain our physical identity, and physical education is our only hope. So thank you. I'm going to do stop sharing now, Elizabeth. I'm
Yes,
a little
that's
bit.
how you do it.
All right, I'm a little bit nervous. All right, there I am.
There we go.
There you are. Excellent.
All right, so to our audience members, I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on this and some questions, and now's the time to start checking those into the chat or the Q&A. We have our first question here from Peter that says, what percentage of kids go on to be pro athletes versus how many kids can we make healthy for a lifetime?
Right. I mean, this is the thing. We know that, becoming a professional athlete is minuscule. We also know that this 80%, these are not kids that are born that way. They're not born obese. They are not born playing video games. So we've got to go after those kids and make sure that they're healthy. The 20% of kids that are playing organized sports, and in the study that I did for the book, we did a study across the country. We talked to athletic directors from all over the country. 16% of kids are playing 3 sports on the average in our study. 16%, 1/6. So that means that 84% are not getting enough exercise for health, because you need to be playing 3 varsity sports. This is a high school study. So that means a huge chunk of kids are not doing enough activity to stay healthy. Of those kids, of those 16%, the pro teams, the Patriots are not going to let the next Tom Brady, oh, maybe they will. That's a bad example. Get away. These pro teams and these college teams that care about it are not going to let the next great athlete escape. We're not going to get beaten by by Croatia in the Olympic Games. This is not going to happen. The top athletes are going to find a way. We're going to have community sports teams as opposed to high school sports teams. This is all going to work itself out. And indeed, that's the way it's done in most of the world. And they seem to produce plenty of good athletes.
So one of the questions that I wrote down is, what can we do as parents or as teachers? These might be different answers, while we wait for schools to hopefully catch up and fix this. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old is definitely, yes, he's addicted to screens. It doesn't help right now that so much of schooling right now is remote and virtual. And I used to say, hey, we're going to have a screen-free day, but I can't just pull him out of school whenever I want. And then he's already had the screens. I can definitely say that his attitude is different when there's screen time in the morning. But how do we as parents and as teachers, how do we increase this physical activity in the small ways? Systemic change obviously is the goal, but what can we do?
So it's all in the book, but truly what we can do is we have to make this a national concern, and not just a national, an international concern, because other Western countries are having the same problem. I spent a lot of time in Ireland, and it's the same problem in Ireland. What we have to do is attack this from both sides. And what I mean by that is from legislation, and we're going to be introducing legislation in Concord this autumn to talk about this, and it's going to get shot down, of course, but that's okay. But then the other way we have to do it is through the PTAs. And for anybody out there, I would love to talk to your PTA or your student group. I gave a talk just this afternoon to a school faculty meeting. We have to get the people like you, Elizabeth, and people with young children that are saying, this is unacceptable to us. We have to get our kids' heart rates up every day. And as long as we're fighting with the powers that be, it's going to be just that. It's going to be a fight, and we need everybody in that. So if we get a grassroots movement at the PTA level, at the school board level, at the superintendent's office, if your superintendent got inundated with letters, and there are letters on our website, survivalofthefit.net, that you can download and personalize, and there are other plans in the book. If we do that, we have a fighting chance. And I must say that I am a bit prejudiced, because I feel like in the state of New Hampshire, we can do it. We have the education, we have Plymouth State College and UNH and Keene State. We have the teachers that are motivated, and we have a small enough state that with really not much effort, we should be able to really make something happen.
I've just tossed a link into the chat sidebar for anybody here that has the link to those form letters, if you want to take a click over there. So Charlene just asked, how do we get politicians and administrators to prioritize PE in schools? 40 minutes per week is clearly not enough. I guess, so basically, be the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
And I suppose make a case for the numbers, I guess, with the money. There. So Francis wants to know, how can we take baby steps towards this goal?
Yeah, the baby steps are the letters. The baby steps are getting your friend. If that superintendent, if your principal hears it once, twice, as Arlo Guthrie would say, 100 times, we're going to have a movement. We're going to have a revolution, which is what I'm calling for. And they have the data. I've talked to high school and other principals, and on the website, I talked to this one principal from New Jersey, and she says, honestly, she says, you get to the meetings, the principals, PE comes up and then it's gone. They talk about it for about 3 minutes because they're not getting pressure from Washington to do this. It's No Child Left Behind, and then it was the race to the top with the Obama administration. And obviously we didn't see anything from Trump, and I don't know if we're going to see anything from the Biden administration. We can't wait, because if we can do it in New Hampshire, that's going to roll across the country. And the schools that have done this, the other thing is that we have data for this, and this data has been around. And the poster child for this is Naperville, Illinois. You can punch it up on YouTube. Naperville, Illinois, now it's a rich suburban school district outside of Chicago, with the emphasis there on rich. Their gyms look like high-level, spas, and they have all kinds of equipment. They have kayaks in the damn pool. I mean, it's unbelievable. But we don't need to do that. We don't need kayaks in the pool. We have enough, and we have the motivation. We have the educated PE teachers to do all this, but we just have to rattle cages, and we just have to keep rattling the cages. But I can tell you, if you have an elderly parent, the one thing that they can do for their Alzheimer's disease is what? It's exercise. It's not Sudokus. It's not crossword puzzles. Maybe it's learning to play the piano also. But the real thing is exercise. That's what's going to stave it off. And guess what? It's the same thing with our kids. That's what's going to keep their brains going. And the teachers know this, but people feel hamstrung for one reason or another. And because it is controversial. And then when you say, well, how are we going to pay for the extra PE teachers? And you say, well, we just have to get rid of varsity sports. Yeah, that's very popular. But those varsity sports are going to the haves. It's truly the rich keep getting richer. The haves keep getting those kids in Manchester City, the poor kids in Manchester City. Those are the kids that we have to worry about, because we're paying for them on the other end. We're paying for them in healthcare costs. We're paying for them in mental health costs. We're paying for them in poor academics, getting them jobs. We're paying for them up and down the line.
Someone asks, is the U.S. still the fattest country?
Yes. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, I'm laughing. It's terribly sad, but other countries are getting there. And because, we have an influence, we still have an influence in the world. And China and India, when they see the increase in their middle classes, guess what middle class means? Middle class means going to McDonald's. Middle class means eating more Western diet. One of the great things we did to Ecuador was we discovered that quinoa was like really healthy. So what happened? So they started exporting quinoa, and rather than these Ecuadorians having all this quinoa now to eat, they started eating other flours, and their obesity rate has increased. So it's just an incredible worldwide problem that, again, if we don't do anything, it's just going to get worse.
So ideally, we would have less obesity, but is it more important for the kids to be slender, or is it more important for them to be active even if they're not slender?
Yeah, I think so. It's getting the heart rate up and the other stuff for sure. And that's why for sure to work on the ultra processed food side is a big part of it. And I know the food people will emphasize that, but absolutely, because by not getting your heart rate up, by not playing, and I'm saying this like I want the kids to get on treadmills, which is fine, but really letting the kids play and run around. By not doing that and being outdoors, that's where a lot of the mental health stress and the anxiety and the depression really comes. And all of this is tied up. It's not just one thing. And I don't want to make this sound simple. It's very complicated, but there is a relatively simple solution. But where the complication comes from outside. The complication comes from the politicians, from the superintendents, from the organized sports teams, from Ronald McDonald. That's where all the problems come from. But we can beat them off with the right energy and the right attitude.
Brooklyn asks, do you speak to young people? Is there a way to train youth to train the adults? Maybe it will be the students who start the revolution.
I'm going to say something really depressing. I think that this present generation of teenagers is lost. My wife's a seventh grade teacher. I don't see a lot of hope for the middle schoolers because the ones that have lost their physical identity, as you all know, to get that iPhone out of their hands, to have them just go out and play, to have them go for a walk, to have them ride their bikes is really hard. What I would propose is that we start this by making sure our kindergarteners get that high level of activity every day, and then go to first grade, and then go to second grade, and then go to third grade. In other words, I don't want our middle school and high school teachers losing their mind, and high school parents and middle school parents losing their minds right now, because I think that we might have lost that battle. And but we can't let this next generation be lost, and that's kind of where I would take the fight. Um, and I think that that's the only way we can take the fight, if we make sure the kids don't lose their physical identity. So to get to your point, what about the young people? If we make sure a kindergartner is running around every day for 45 minutes, and then the first graders are, and then the second graders are, they're not going to get to seventh grade. And all of a sudden you say, okay, you only have one PE class a week. They're like, what do you mean? We got to run around every day. They're going to be addicted because they're going to have their physical identity. They'll be addicted to playing and exercise.
Well, I certainly don't feel great when I go several days without going for my jog. I can attest to that. So you mentioned earlier that one of the ways that we can fund getting more PE back into schools is to get rid of organized sports. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I have to. I think I better. We have to get rid of the varsity sports system that we have in America, because we are pouring zillions and zillions of dollars into it, and it's only for a minority of kids. In a perfect world, we have Naperville High School, we have varsity sports, and we have PE for every kid every day. That is a perfect world. But if you're not willing to increase your school budget to get there, that's not going to happen. So, one of the examples I give in the book is varsity sports for a rich school and varsity sports for the poor school cost the same amount of money. Okay. So, in this, to use Claremont as an example, since they've been fighting the education battle, the high school in Claremont is if they're going to field the 20 or 25 varsity sports teams, it's going to cost them X amount of money. A high school in Bow will field those teams. It's going to cost them X amount of money. So that bigger percentage of the clamor. So again, the rich keep getting richer, or in this case, the poor keep getting poorer. We're asking Claremont to put a bigger percentage of their high school budget into varsity sports. And this is just insane. This is not the way it works in most countries, and this is not the way it should be working here. We need to have school for education. Part of education is being physically fit enough to be educated, and that's PE every day. Sports should be a community organization, and that's what it is in Ireland and in Scandinavian countries and in most countries. It's through the communities, and I know that our communities in New Hampshire, and again, I'm prejudiced, I know that they would support that. But then the people that want to support the sports and want to enter their kids in organized sports, they have the ability to do that. And there's going to be a certain amount of money going into that, but there's also a lot of local money and contributions from, from the zillion people that make contributions now. But we're not excluding those 80% of kids. And again, at the end of the day, it's a lot of that 80% that's losing out are the poorer kids whose parents don't have the wherewithal to get them involved in the organized sports. Organized sports has got to be part of the community. The community then the kids will have access to a much more egalitarian program.
So there's a concept of food deserts in out there, which is that you may literally not live close enough to a store that sells like you might not live close enough to a store that sells healthy food. You might literally only live near convenience stores or places that sell high processed food. You might not live near someplace that sells a vegetable. Are there physical education deserts, like I mean, it's easy for me. I have a front yard. I can chuck my kids out and be like, there's a snowbank, go dig. If you live someplace, especially with COVID right now, where you don't want to go find someplace to gather, I don't know what to call it. Is it a playground desert? Is there, what do those persons do if they're stuck in an apartment? And especially right now, they can't exactly go find a park safely.
No, I love that. And I think that's a great metaphor. For sure, the people that really see it are the inner city. And for sure, if you're a kid downtown Portsmouth or Manchester City or Nashua, you feel that. Folks in the North Country and have a different issue where they have, the rural, the more rural communities. The kids are so far away from friends or from ball fields maybe or such that's harder. Absolutely true that there are these deserts, but they're not as frequent and as you might think. I've been in touch with a fellow in Boston who's doing this brilliant program for some inner city kids there, and they're getting them outside. And what he found with COVID is that even though they'd like to bring the kids surfing, they like to bring the kids up here to go hiking or whatever, they're exploring the parks and everything that they have in Boston, in New York City, in these places. And it's the rare place with a little with a little imagination that you can find something to do or something cool, some kind of activity. And again, and maybe I'm too much of an optimist here, but I think that the community would get behind this and have gotten behind these kinds of things time and time again. Again, with knowing that in the inner cities, in certain cities, they don't have that, but in New Hampshire, and I would say even in our New Hampshire cities, I think there's enough energy and there's enough support that the PE deserts or the sports or activity deserts are rare. Now, in terms of I know what you're all thinking, what about the gym? We have one gym, we have X, 100 kids in the schools. How are we going to find the time to do that? That's where you have to use your imagination. And that's where the cafeteria or an empty classroom or chairs have to be pushed away or whatever. And yeah, it's not ideal and it's not kayaks in the pool, but this is what we have to do. We can't we don't have any option because our kids are not learning unless they get their heart rates up every day.
Peter comments, it sounds like what we need to do is put physical fitness first and organized sports second, regardless of how we pay for it. It sounds like a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, regardless of how we pay for it. And that's exactly right. And I know it's easy to talk about money that you don't see, but we're spending that money that you don't see, and it costs a lot more than any of these PE programs or sports programs. And again, the people that are poo-pooing this are people that thought like my profession years ago, like doctors. We emphasize disease, we emphasize fighting disease rather than emphasizing health. And to have people living near power plants or in tenements with asbestos and with bad water. And that's not 1900, folks. That was Flint, Michigan in 2019. And so this is still happening in America, and that costs money. That costs a heck of a lot more money than a PE teacher, which, by the way, costs $150,000 or so a year. And the PE assistant that I ask for to help them is $40,000 or $50,000 a year. That is chump change compared to what we're spending on kids' medical bills right now. And that's not even talking about the incarceration and all the other issues that kids that we can trace right to academic achievement and to health and to so many of these other things. The lines are very clear.
All right, so that about ends us for this evening. Survival of the Fit is available from Gibson's Bookstore. There's like charts in here and stuff, guys. This is great. And suggested engagement in physical activity. There's suggested plans in here. Thank you so much, Dr. Dan, for joining us this evening. Thank you, everybody, from joining us from home as well.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, everybody, and please join the revolution.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye-bye.